Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I like to talk about American presidents, and I'm continuing with my discussion in honor of Black History Month. Today, I want to discuss not so much an American president, but the person I'm discussing, of course, was a leader of the Confederacy, and his name is uh, Judah Philip Benjamin. And of course, the American president, when he was a leader in the Confederacy, was, of course, Abraham Lincoln. Uh, so, Judah Philip Benjamin is considered the brain to have been the brains of the Confederacy. The first time I heard about Judah Philip Benjamin or Judah P. Benjamin was from uh, a Jewish man at my gym, right? Uh, this so so it's kind of funny that my lifestyle has been disrupted. The neighborhood where I was raised in Montgomery County, my pattern was to go to the gym, right? There was a neighborhood gym, several gyms I used to go to, and I first heard about Judah P. Benjamin over a decade ago, right? Over a decade ago, just before I got into law school. And so I'd go to the gym regularly, and there were these two. It's funny. There were these two Jewish men that I spoke with. They were elderly men, and they used the gym regularly, and they took an interest in me. One was a Reformed Jew, right? He was an alum of the school I ended up going to, and he was the one who told me about Judah P. Benjamin. And then there was another one who was an Orthodox Jew, right? And what's interesting is they hated each other and they didn't talk to each other. So they basically took turns talking to me, right? So I enjoyed working out, and it's funny, that I'm embroiled in this smear campaign by Montgomery County at the moment, because I was actually respected and liked in the community that Judge James Bonifant, the corrupt judge in Montgomery County, has kicked me out from, right? Um, so let me continue. so uh, my pattern was to work out regularly, and so I learned about Judah P. Benjamin from the man who was a reformed Jewish man, and he was an alumni, right? He's an alumnus of my of George Washington University, right, where I ended up going to school. And so he was the one who first told me to go and look up the vice president of the Confederacy. That's what he called Judah P. Cohen. Judah P. Benjamin. I don't know why I keep saying Cohen. Um, so he was the one who asked me to go look him up. So I went to check, and I saw the vice president was a guy called Stevens, but he wasn't Jewish. But I so found that uh, Judah P. Benjamin was considered the brains of the Confederacy, and of course he had been Secretary of War, Attorney General of the Confederacy, Secretary of War. He had been um, he had been Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Secretary of War of the Confederacy, and he was considered the second most powerful man in the Confederacy. So his life is very, you know, is kind of interesting, and so I read, a bit about his biography, and I want to discuss that today. Of course, we have to be very careful when we discuss, people, especially, people who are not, members of our ethnic group, especially in this era of anti-Semitism. But of course, I'm a historian, and one of the good things about studying history is the skills, the research skills, the critical thinking helps us to unpack, a lot of the myths and the tropes. So, there are already all these myths and tropes um, you know, about Jewish involvement in this Atlantic slave trade, this slavery and whatnot. Indeed, Judah P. Benjamin was he had been a slave owner. He was invested um, in the in slavery, and of course he was a leader in the Confederacy. Um, and in fact, his cousin's family, David Levi um, Yulee, they were also, they were very wealthy. He was a very prosperous person, and his family had made money, through sugarcane plantations in the Caribbeans, right? So um, I think, in order to address that trope about Jewish people financing or establishing the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. Uh, well, were there participants who were Jewish? Yes, but I don't think it's true that they invented the slave trade or slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, or they made the most money out of it. The transatlantic slave trade was something that was established by Europeans. It was funded by Europeans, and were there Jewish people who participated? Yes, like the family of David Levi Levi Yulee. By the way, David Levi Yulee was the first person of Jewish ancestry to become a United States senator. So, a very prominent family in the United States. While Judah P. Benjamin was the first person to profess the Jewish faith to be elected as a United States senator, to serve as a United States senator. During that time, senators weren't elected. The way it turned, the way it was transformed in the 20th century. So, so in any event, excuse me, in any event, what I'm going to do is try and debunk some of the myths concerning any form of Jewish conspiracy uh, regarding the transatlantic slave trade or the Confederacy. Uh, of course, the two the two um, figures that I talked about at my gym, the Orthodox Jew and the Reformed Jewish person who couldn't get along, who hated one another, should serve as evidence proof that there cannot actually be a sort of concerted, um, um, uh, inviolable Jewish conspiracy to dominate, people. I mean, of course, these two hated each other, and they clearly, they're clearly um, proof that no such thing, no such trope can actually materialize. And if anybody believes that, I guess, yeah, I don't know. Well, there's no credence to what I've just said. Again, the purpose of what I'm discussing is in honor of Black History Month, right? It's not my job to dispel conspiracy theories or to advance them, but these are historical figures that I want to discuss. So, interestingly, another reason why I brought up the Orthodox Jewish man that I used to speak with at my gym, who hated the Reform Jewish man, who was one who, with asked told me about Judah P. Benjamin, is because this other man was one who directed me to read Alexander Hamilton's Ron Chenow's Alexander Hamilton, his book, his version of Alexander Hamilton. He had insisted that Alexander Hamilton was Jewish, and of course, there's no credence whatsoever to that. I mean, uh, but he had referred me to read Ron Chenow's Alexander Hamilton, very interesting book. Um, so let me talk about Judah P. Benjamin. There were two important things I wanted to bring out about Judah P. Benjamin. One, yes, I mentioned that he went. He had been a slave owner. He served as a U.S. senator from representing Louisiana, and of course, during the outbreak of the war, He did serve important cabinet positions within the Confederacy, including as Secretary of State, Secretary of War, and Attorney General. Um, Now, prior to that, though, he had gone to Yale College. Apparently, Yale was very popular amongst Southern elites. Um, he Judah P. Benjamin was not actually born in America. His family immigrated to America, right? He had been born in Dutch West Indies, which is today called the British Virgin Islands, of course, which was purchased by President Woodrow Wilson. Um, he went to Yale, but he was kicked out of Yale on very controversial, for controversial reasons. It's unclear why he was kicked out of Yale, but he did not graduate at Yale. At 16, he did not graduate. But he went on to study on his own. Of course, back then, to be a lawyer, you would clerk under, a practicing attorney, in their law office. So he became an attorney, passed the bar, and started practicing, right? Passed the bar, started practicing as an attorney, and he became very successful. Significantly, he published a very seminal work on law. It's called the Digest of Judicial Decisions in the Territory of Louisiana, New Orleans, and Louisiana. It's got a very long name, but it's a digest, and it's basically an analysis of 6,000 cases, uh, from Louisiana and New Orleans, and so he became very popular, and that sort of kicked off his career as a lawyer. Now, what I wanted to focus on was a case he had regarding a slave revolt. Right, there was a dispute um, over the payment, right, the refusal to pay by his clients in a group of insurance companies uh, after uh, a slave ship called the Creole, right? Its slaves had revolted, and they'd driven the ship to Nassau in the Bahamas, where they were set free because slavery had been banned by the British, in the 1830s there. So the investors, the owners of the slaves, had lost their investments in the slaves, and they were asking the insurance companies to pay. The insurance companies refused. They hired Judah Benjamin to represent them. Judah Benjamin, by the way, won the case on behalf of the insurance companies. But what was significant is a speech he gave in his brief, right? He had a screed in his brief, and that screed was used by abolitionists, right, in their publications. Right? It was in that screed he had stated, that's Judah Benjamin. He said, "What is a slave, right? Who is a slave?" And he answered that question. That is a human being. The slave is a human being, and he described the conditions of a slave, an African man, in ways that had not been, at least that were not, purveyed at the time, since blacks were in the Constitution as three-fifths of a white man. But he was saying that a slave is a human being. He has the feelings, the heart of a white man. He can love. He has the intellect of a white man. These were the descriptions that Judah Benjamin used for Africans, right? Even though they were enslaved in the Americas at this time, and he said that described them with all the feelings, basically asserting that they were, other than their condition of servitude, they were equal human beings to white people, to white men. And he asserted that they did have a passion for their freedom, and if given the probable chance, they would seize it. And so what his argument was, that the overcrowding and the terrible conditions of the ship by the slave owners, right, had caused the revolt, right? That they raised the likelihood of revolt, because and they should have taken greater precautions. He did win the case on behalf of his clients. Now, the other reason why I found him interesting was after the the South, the Confederacy had lost to the Union. He fled. He fled to England, and at 54 years old, right, he started all over again. Right, he had been a successful attorney in America, but he lost all of this. But he went and started all over again at 54 years old, and he went to read the British law, system, the British legal system. Of course, the British legal system is different from the American legal system. In England, you have like a two-tier system of solicitors and barristers. I'm not going to get into those distinctions. Barristers, they're the ones that can represent attorneys. They can represent clients in court, right? You'd have to be a barrister. And so he studied, he became a barrister, and he went all the way. And they have classifications, by the way, in the British legal system. And he eventually rose to be Queen's Counsel. That's the highest level. And he reached the height of his career again. And just like he was involved in a huge publication in the United States, which launched his legal career, he was involved again in another publication, seminal publication in England, that the Benjamin, was it Benjamin's Book of Sales or something? I can't quite remember, but something with regard to commercial law, right? So he gained expertise again in commercial and sales, commercials, and transactional law, right? Legal matters. So that's what's kind of interesting. Now, is it odious? Is it terrible that he was a participant in the institution of slavery? Absolutely. And interestingly, his cousin, right, David Levi Yulee, who came from a wealthier family than Judah. Uh, Judah P. Benjamin's. Interesting, Judah Benjamin's father and David Levi Yulee's father had been business partners. All right, they were business partners, and they were first cousins and were business partners. So Judah P. Benjamin. What I was going to say about David Yulee was that he had been imprisoned after the war because he helped um, Jefferson Davis escape. Right, he helped in the escape of Jefferson Davis. Um, so David Yulee had, he was a very prosperous person. His father had bought 50,000 acres of land in Florida, and David Levi Yulee, apart from his political accomplishments, as the first um, U.S. senator of Jewish ancestry. Of course, he converted to Christianity, unlike his cousin Judah P. Benjamin. Uh, David Levi Yulee was also he was founder and president of the Florida Railway Corporation. He married a very prosperous family as well. His wife's father had been governor of Kentucky. Now, it's interesting. So, um, while um, these are examples of Jewish people who did participate in the institution of slavery, again, I guess it was incidental because um, slavery was established. Again, it was an enterprise created and by Europeans, and now were they Jewish who were involved. Uh, you know, got involved. Well, that happens to have been the case. Like the Yulee and the Benjamin family, right? They were involved in it. Interestingly, they're not Ashkenazi Jews that we know. They're Sephardic Jews, right? And they were born in, at least Judah Benjamin was born in the Dutch West Indies, which today is known as the British Virgin Islands. And so, not to be overly one-sided. I want to talk about the positives in the relationships between Jewish people and Black Americans. We have to remember that during the civil rights era, there were Jewish people who participated in the civil rights marches and protests on behalf of Black Americans. And in fact, two Jewish people were known to have been killed, which, during the in Mississippi, which sparked off, what's called the Mississippi burning. That's the Jewish man from New York, Michael Sherman, who was a member of CORE, that's the Congress of Racial uh, Equality Corps, and there was also Andrew Goodman. Andrew Goodman had been a student at Queens College, and of course, they had both been riding with the black African American member of the NAACP, James Chaney, and they were ambushed by conspiracy of the sheriff and the deputy sheriff, who was a Klansman, and they were killed. They were shot and killed. So there were many Jewish people who participated in the civil rights movement on behalf of Black Americans. And today we talk about another thing I've always found very interesting is the diverse in terms of the diversity in America, and the sort of cooperation that that can be fostered when groups work together, and the promise of America. Um, very early in my writing, I wrote about hip hop, and I loved hip hop rap when I was growing up as a kid in Nigeria. I was a fan of NWA, Run DMC. So it's kind of interesting that Jewish entrepreneurs had actually partnered and financed the early hip hop stars and moguls. If people don't know, I think this is appropriate for me to mention that um, Rick Rubin and a guy called Leo Cohen, maybe that's why I've been mentioning the name Cohen, Leo Cohen, they helped establish Def Jam Records. Of course, Def Jam Records is through which that was the recording label of that launched the careers of people like Ron DMC, right? And yeah, so they were involved in the establishment of Tommy Records, which launched a lot of successful rap artists as well. Now, in terms of Puff Daddy, of course, who went on to become a very successful, close to being a billionaire, right until his travails, and of course, he's currently in prison because of misconduct, a personal misconduct. Uh, but Clive Davis, who's Jewish, Clive Davis, he had been the founder, head of Arista Records, and he had been a lawyer. He had actually helped finance Puff Daddy and helped him establish Bad Boy Records. So he had been a very early investor in Puff Daddy as Bad Boy Records. So, there's been a lot of collaboration, between Jewish people, Jewish entrepreneurs, and Black Americans as well. And there's been cooperation between Jewish activists who died on behalf of the civil rights movement during the civil rights era, like I mentioned. But I thought it was interesting for me to mention Judah P. Benjamin, also because I was just going to, mention a footnote regarding Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the defunct Confederacy, band of secessionists. Um, Interestingly, Jefferson Davis had been the Secretary of War for the United States under President Franklin Pierce. Right, Franklin Pierce was our 14th president, um, and I found this out in the memoirs, the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. So Ulysses S. Grant talked about how Jefferson Davis, ironically, had been involved in the modernization of the United States Army as Secretary of War. Jefferson Davis had revolutionized, helped launch the revolutionizing of technology in the U.S. Army. He initiated surveys to build the transcontinental railways, right, to develop, improve logistics and transportation for the United States Army. He modernized, weaponry for the United States Army. He enlarged the enrollment, enlistment of United States armies. He really revamped the United States Army. So that's Jefferson Davis was kind of um, the the changes, the modernization that um, he infused into the United States uh, Army. He helped create the very lethal force, right? The very formidable and lethal force that he came up against, and that would, of course, defeat him in the Civil War. So I thought I didn't know what to focus on when I was going to discuss this part of the Confederacy, but I thought I should focus on more on Judah P, Judah P. Benjamin, and draw some kind of positive aspect. The fact that Judah P. Benjamin was able to he moved to England, and he died in France, by the way. He became successful in England, and that after the with the end of the Confederacy, he moved to England and started his career again as a lawyer, as an attorney, and as a barrister, and he rose to the top of his profession. Of course, that aspect, of course, is significant to me because I'm a lawyer, and I've discussed, the smear campaign and how my rights were violated by rogue agents, racist rogue agents in Montgomery County, Maryland, and a corrupt judge. And of course, 3 years of my life has been taken from me. It took me 3 years to graduate from law school. I've had these trumped up charges against me in Montgomery County, Maryland, with no trial. It's just been a smear campaign, and it's kept me from things I've been used to doing. I talked about how I first learned about Judah Philip Benjamin from a Jewish man because I was used to going to my gym all the time, and of course, I also first learned about. So I spoke with very interesting people at my gym, and I talked about how I also first learned about Ron Chenow's a book about Alexander Hamilton. And, I'd read a book about Alexander Hamilton before in Nigeria because, we had a biography of Alexander Hamilton in my home when I was growing up. But I didn't read Ron Chenow's version until, this person referred me to it. My name is Oluro Timeusha. I'm going to stop this video here, and I will continue with other videos. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.